Bryant Fisher. I'm the Chief Experience Officer at TAG, and I am joined here today by Jared Austin, who is the Director of IoT and Digital Platforms for Cumberland Group. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of TAG TV, TAG Radio. Jared, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely great to have you. And this is a fantastic subject that everybody is interested in right now. So we're going to go right there with IoT. So what can you tell us about Internet of Things? Because we're all like, I think I know what you mean, but tell me a little bit more. So tell us what IoT means.
That's probably the toughest question that you're going to ask me, and probably one that we can debate on for the whole interview.
Yeah.
So, IoT, simply stated, it's the act of connecting the physical world to the internet.
Okay.
But it's really so much more than that, right? So my definition is it's taking hardware, devices, things in the physical world and joining that with software, and then leveraging the data that's exchanged between those two to really, create an amazing solution. And it's something that, is incredibly powerful and differentiating.
Yeah.
It's what companies are turning to look at, the next level of how they're going to scale their business, grow their business, maintain or drive competitive advantage. And if you think about the last 10 years of innovation, there's two things that to me stand out.
Yeah.
One is cloud computing. The other is software. We know software is incredibly powerful. Look at the mobile apps that we have access to on our phones, even web apps, how we interact with businesses. You don't have to call people anymore. You just press a button on your phone and it happens, right? So that power and capability is now getting joined with the physical world, which is creating an incredible solution. So
right, because your mind starts to go there, right?
Right.
So I mean, would you have thought when we were growing up that this would be the world we would live in now, right? So wearable technology, people go Westworld in their mind, like, is that where we're headed? Yes. What are some of the sort of day-to-day practical applications of IoT that you could say, here's an example, and people would say, oh, I know what you're talking about. Okay, I'm there.
Yeah, so there's a few, categories. One is the consumer space. So most everybody outside of technology understands what, smart devices are. Yeah. We're seeing it in our homes. We have connected doorbells, we have connected door locks, we have thermostats. And in the consumer space, all these devices we can control. And so it's, really made our lives easier, but they're not quite to where the enterprise is focusing on. So the enterprise space, we are still, looking at putting these connected devices and sensors and solutions in, to the company's physical operations, whether it's a warehouse, a retail store, a shelf, something like that. But enterprises are looking at the data that these devices are generating, and that's where their real power is, especially when you combine artificial intelligence, machine learning. You're able to really drive value. And so we're driving toward what I would call an immersive world where we walk into a store, it knows us, things just happen. You don't have to pull out your phone anymore to do something. It just happens. And so it's scary, but it's exciting at the same time. Yeah,
we were chatting right before about the funny story about my son last night. We're heading to the grocery store. The thing he hates the most. He doesn't want to go. And he's like, Mom, why can't a robot just go pick up the groceries and bring him? I'm like, maybe soon, right? Already we see so much happening just within that space of being able to order your groceries online and go and pick them up, and things are moving in that direction pretty quickly, it seems.
And software is really powering that capability. So introducing mobile ordering and delivery. What I think is something that we're going to see in the next few years is, IoT could be the one thing that saves retail.
Wow.
That brings people back into the stores.
Whoa,
because,
you heard it here.
Right?
Yeah.
We love to shop. We love to see, touch, feel things. It's really going to come down to automating what's not fun about going to a store. So the grocery store example, I don't want to wait in line. I want to grab things off the shelf and go.
Right.
I hate waiting in line. It's a waste of time just to slide a credit card. Obviously, I have to pay for my things. We all have to pay.
Yeah, we gotta do that.
But look at what Amazon has done with the cashless store concept, where you walk in and pull something off a shelf. Sensors are deployed everywhere to make this possible. You just leave, and later your credit card is charged.
Isn't that crazy?
If grocery stores look at that and start implementing that now, I guarantee you it's going to drive traffic into those stores.
And not just grocery
stores, right?
Yeah. Sign me have.
Yep.
Well, let's talk about your role at Cumberland Group. So how long have you been there? And as this director level position, what are you doing for Cumberland?
Well, I joined Cumberland Group 6 months ago.
Congratulations.
First of the year. Thank you.
You're new. Are you new to Atlanta?
No, I've been in Atlanta for, almost 10 years now.
Okay, we'll get around to favorite restaurants in a second. Go ahead.
That's good. I worked for Coca-Cola for about 10 years.
Nice.
Held various roles within IT, from software development, IT architecture, data integration. Last role was with the Coke North America Director of Cloud Operations. So I got to move all of our applications out of the data center and into public cloud. Exciting project, but when I got the call about getting to work with IoT and build those and deploy those solutions, I couldn't turn it down.
Was it a no-brainer?
Yeah, it's my passion. I love blending hardware, devices, sensors with software, just like we talked about.
That
so
specifically, yeah.
As to circle back around the question about running the practice, so within Cumberland Group, there are 5 engineering practices, mine being IoT focused. So we essentially help our customers deliver those solutions. I run an engineering team that has multi-skill sets. We have, hardware engineering, electrical
Pocket
engineering.
protectors.
Right, a whole thing, right? Got to have everybody there because, that IoT solutions are difficult. It's integration of various technologies and moving parts and pieces, and for it to work, they all have to work together and talk to each other. So
I've got a question for you. What are some of the challenges that Cumberland Group is facing right now? And then we're going to talk about what it is you all do and your differentiator. What makes Cumberland Group stand out in this area? But right now, with all we've just talked about and the amazing technologies that are coming on board, and all the frontier yet ahead of us, what are the challenges that you all are facing, and how are you overcoming them?
Well, so an IoT solution to me has 3 core parts. There's the hardware side of it, there's connectivity of that hardware, and then there's the software side. So you have to have varying skill sets for each of those areas to be able to deliver. So our differentiator and what we say is we can deliver the whole solution because we do have those skill sets. My team has expertise in all those areas, so we can do that. The next, we take a very disciplined approach to these things because they are hard. I'd say one of the challenges is actually the business case. So before we even touch the technology, we got to make sure the business case is there, because sometimes it's not. With depending on the problem that needs solving, and the technology available today, it may not make sense. The return just may not be there because the technology is not quite there yet.
So you're going to help someone understand that.
Exactly. That's the first step in our 4-phase approach. We call it ideation.
Ideation.
Yeah.
All right. So we got 4 phases.
Yep. Ideation.
All right.
That's looking at the business case. Let's make sure it's feasible. Let's make sure it's technically feasible. And of course, the financials make sense.
Right.
Or maybe customers are wanting to explore IoT solutions, but they just don't know where to start. So we ideate about, well, what are the problems you're having today? Let's look at your company's strategy to figure out what you're trying to achieve. And let's see if an IoT solution, or sometimes I call them a connected solution, not to use the buzzword all the time. Let's see if it makes sense to apply that to this problem. The second step is a prototype phase. So we kind of in a lab form, setting, we construct everything end to end.
I'm picturing robots running around.
Right. We have a couple of robots. Right. Yeah. So it's prototyping the hardware. Maybe it's not quite production grade. It can't be deployed in an industrial setting yet, but at least it works inside an office in a lab. And so we have that built end to end to make sure it actually works. The next phase would be to take those devices and move them to a production grade, or make them be able to deploy them. So we deploy those at maybe one location, and so we determine if the solution is still viable.
Test it.
We test it, and then we make some final tweaks during that pilot phase.
Cool.
And then the last, but definitely not least, is the production rollout. So think of a company that may have several warehouses or manufacturing facilities. We deploy that solution to all of them and scale the solution from there.
So when you were talking about approaches that you all use, you've run us through the 4 phases, but what are some of the more essential approaches when you're trying to, gosh, to me, these concepts are huge, right? Some of these things are just large and looming. How are you helping your clients sort of narrow it down to what's actually going to hit the ground, run, and help them grow? Am I describing that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things is, first step is to connect whatever you're trying to get data from or automate. And so we look at the hardware piece of the puzzle,
Yeah.
and that often goes immediately to connectivity. Maybe you have no connectivity in your location, no power. I've got a customer today, has no power, no internet. So what do we do, right?
What do you do?
Well, it creates challenges. We have to
Okay.
look at things like cellular connectivity maybe, and then power. We have to think about solar panels and batteries that keep these devices running and operational.
Okay.
And so those that's quite a bit of work right there just to figure out all those things. The software piece is kind of the last phase of the whole solution.
Yeah.
And it's actually maybe the easier one, although it's maybe the most time consuming because obviously there's software development involved.
Sure.
and things like that. But yeah, it's around, it's sometimes difficult to, enable connectivity and figure out what hardware is the right choice.
You
That's
guys
one
come
of
in.
that's one
Yeah.
of the things we do. We look at all pieces of technology that's available today. We don't focus in on one particular hardware vendor. There's a lot of great companies that are producing a lot of unique IoT hardware products out there. So we choose what's best for the use case and what makes sense from a cost perspective too.
I've got to ask you, sitting in this space of Internet of Things and all that can mean to our world now and in the future, what impresses you? Can you talk to me just personally about what you're impressed by or the kinds of innovations that you get to work with directly or just seeing in this space that you think, wow, that is a big frontier ahead, or that impresses me,
Yes.
or I'm surprised?
So two things. One is what we talked about earlier, where in 5 to maybe 10 years, we're going to create these immersive environments.
Yeah.
Again, whether it's we're walking to the grocery store, we don't have to check out anymore, or maybe in our homes get a little bit more smarter, and they automatically do things for us.
I don't
unlock
have to
the
fumble with
doors.
the keys.
Exactly, right?
It's me. You know it's me. Open
right?
the door.
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exciting to me, but that's not quite where we are yet. It's coming quick though.
Wow.
The one thing that our team is really excited about is this idea of mesh connected sensors.
Oh, tell me about that.
Yes. So think about a warehouse or maybe a company that has manufacturing facilities. Oftentimes they're trying to connect equipment and machines and even, just boring shelves, right,
Yeah.
to the internet. So you have to add a sensor or a device onto it to be able to detect or, measure something that you're trying to get to. And with that, it's been challenging because traditional IoT technology usually involves a wireless battery-powered sensor that has to talk to a gateway. And those gateways
Got
have
it.
to be deployed throughout the location. That can really add up from a cost perspective. So
Right.
think about cabling, or even if you have to add Wi-Fi infrastructure, that's a lot of
You've got
upfront
to have
investment.
all the things in the wall everywhere.
Exactly, right?
Ah.
It's expensive. And a lot of times companies will just avoid doing this altogether and not
Sure.
even implement the solution because the cost makes the business case upside down.
Okay.
So what we're excited about is introducing mesh connected sensors where you don't have to run all that cabling or provide all that infrastructure. It's one single gateway that can connect a mesh network of nodes and sensors across your entire site. And it's not just one site, but if you're scaling and you have to deliver this to hundreds of warehouses or
Yeah.
maybe several manufacturing plants across the world, the solution then really starts to make business sense because you don't have to make that upfront investment.
So these sensors could connect and talk to each other, minus any of that necessarily that there's connections in the wall, right? So this is literally like you don't have to. There's no plugging in,
Right.
and they're communicating with each other not just in the warehouse, but to
Exactly.
the next warehouse in the next state,
Right.
and the next warehouse in the next country across the pond.
Exactly.
Wow.
So in a one location, if you have a lot of sensors deployed, they talk to each other and relay the data back and forth between them until eventually
Yeah.
they get back to the gateway that's plugged into the network, which gets the data to the internet.
What's a practical application? You talked about warehouse technology. Are there other things we could illustrate for the dear listeners that are here with us today that look like examples they would say aha to? Like what practical applications does mesh technology help us with?
Asset tracking.
Okay.
So as part of this capability, by the way, we've partnered with a company called Wirepass. They're
Okay.
a Finnish-based company, and they have cracked the code on the software algorithm. Essentially, it's embedded software that runs on a chip that
Wow.
powers this mesh capability.
I love it. They've cracked the code.
They've cracked the code
Good for
because
them.
it's incredibly difficult to solve wireless sensors that are battery powered. And by the way, you have to have these batteries last for several years in the enterprise space.
Yeah.
If they don't, the business case again is upside down because you're having to replace batteries so often. Think about maybe you have some devices in the home that you have to replace the batteries. It's every 3 to 6 months.
The fire alarm.
Yes.
Come on with
It just doesn't work in the enterprise space. So these devices have to last 5 to 7 to 10 years. And so this wireless mesh capability is extremely battery efficient so that you can achieve that battery life.
So tracking devices, that's one then. I think we talked a little bit before we got in here about cars, so tracking vehicles.
Yes,
yeah, so
we're seeing that as a real problem that car dealerships, car manufacturers, or any company that deals with lots of cars on a lot, whether it's a parking garage or an outdoor lot, it's a difficult problem. And traditionally, these companies have looked at RFID as a possible solution to that.
Sure.
And maybe to some extent RFID has helped. But we think these wireless mesh sensors that are attached to the cars is the best solution that can fully automate the whole process. So think about checking in a car when it arrives, managing in real time where its location is, and then checking the car out. So it fully automates, the need for somebody to manually run around the lot.
I was just thinking that the person who normally is running around checking the lot will not have to do that. Seems like an inefficient way.
Right. I'm sure we've all, when we're waiting at the dealership buying our new car, we just can't wait. They're trying to find it on the lot, right?
Like, we're so close to closing the sale. We're losing them from the car.
Exactly.
But the mesh technology could change that.
Exactly.
That is Internet of Things.
That's Internet of Things.
That is IoT.
Yeah, it's driving automation, and it's at the end delivering this immersive experience that we're driving toward.
Yeah, we're going to keep talking about that immersive experience, and let's talk about the innovations that you're seeing in the industry that are really making a difference that we haven't talked about already. So I want to make sure I give you plenty of time to discuss any of the other innovations we should all be excited about right now.
Yeah, so mesh connectivity is one. It seems like this is true mesh capability that is allowing us to deliver a mesh network that is connected, it's easy, there's no upfront infrastructure investment required. And in addition to it, before I leave that one, it creates a network that can be used for other use cases. So let's say you deploy a mesh network for one use case, you've got the network in place, so you can actually put more sensors in for more use cases. So you take advantage of that first investment. That's another thing to think about.
So you have the network built.
Yep.
So you can add uses to the network.
Exactly.
Which makes complete sense now that you're telling me.
The business case gets better when you think about it like that.
Initial investment and off to the races.
So we're seeing things like this in the IoT space. A lot of innovations around hardware devices, sensors, low-cost sensors, even more efficient from a battery standpoint. The other technology or radio or RF technology that's being tested or figured out in a lab right now is ultra wideband.
Ultra wideband.
Yes. So ultra wideband is essentially a RF technology that covers obviously a wide band and ultra low power. But the thing about it is the location accuracy of UWB devices. I'll throw the acronym in there.
Help me here.
Is incredibly good. I mean, down to 10 centimeters. So, a consumer IoT use case would be, like you mentioned, when you don't have to have your keys and the door just unlocks when you're there. That's a use case for this technology. Right. So when you're right at the door, it's just in time and unlocks because it knows that you're right there.
It knows I've got groceries.
Right.
And
your hands are full.
Barely getting there.
Right.
Yeah.
And it also is good for, saturated areas like stadiums where there's a lot of Wi-Fi, there's interference of other RF protocols going on, so it excels in those kind of environments.
How exciting!
Yeah, so that's coming.
Yeah, what a cool world to get to live in and work in.
Yeah.
And how cool for Cumberland Group to be in the catbird seat for this.
It is. It is exciting. Cool. Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've talked about some of the ways that Cumberland Group differentiates for its clients. Are there any client use cases that you want to point out and talk about before we move on to a couple other things?
Yeah, so one of the things that we're really excited about, we've had a wonderful customer that has kind of gotten us started maybe almost 2 years ago now, and that's environment monitoring in an industrial space.
Okay.
So this customer manages a large number of warehouses over the U.S. and globally. They are cold storage warehouses where they need to monitor the temperature, right?
Sure.
So there's several rooms within a warehouse that have varying temperatures that are storing food and perishables, and they have to stay, at a certain temperature. So previously they had a manual process in place and even an analog process where they were using, just analog thermometers to
Sure.
track the temperature, and it was somebody walking around with a clipboard writing the temperature down every couple of hours to ensure that from audit purposes that the temperatures are remaining where they should be. So we replaced the analog thermometer with a connected thermometer. So we're collecting temperature data across the rooms. They now have a real-time view of that data. And then from an operational standpoint, if temperature is trending up and it shouldn't be, there's an alert generated. And then all that data is ingested into their ERP that runs their business
Sure.
for audit and tracking purposes. So it's really streamlined that whole process and, given them the visibility that they were looking for.
If you think of that, think of those efficiencies, that's going to deliver ROI. So that
Absolutely.
will absolutely impact the bottom line.
Yeah, so the people that were collecting temperatures, they can now work on things that are more value add, right? Maybe it's improving the quality of the product movements around, making more timely movements or checking product in, checking it out, all those kind of things.
Cool.
And the other use case is
Yeah.
back on the vehicle tracking. So
Yeah.
obviously it's a need in the market. We're excited to deliver mesh connected RF sensors that can be tagged on cars where you can track that in real time.
Nice.
So very exciting.
Very exciting. Also exciting is being here in Atlanta, right? So this is a true tech city. And I always love to ask people about their perspectives on that, like why you love being in Atlanta, why Cumberland Group is in Atlanta. And especially I want to just thank Cumberland Group for your partnership with TAG. We love having you guys as a member and a partner. It's a great relationship. And I think, as you know, TAG's mission is to fuel the innovation economy. So it's exciting to be a part of all of these things and to be helping the technology community grow. So tell me what your thoughts are on why it's so great to be here in Atlanta.
Well, just like you said, it is great to be a part of TAG, and it's important that these organizations exist within our community, especially because at the end of the day, technology is hard and
Yes,
it's challenging, right? And you need that group of people to get together to discuss these challenges, to kind of gain insight or best practices on how to approach these things from people that may have tried or are doing them now. So it's great to have that organization that brings us all together, and so those are some of the really great benefits that I see when we're able to get together and discuss these things.
We could be anywhere, right? But we're here in Atlanta. We love this city and love what it's capable of doing. When someone asks you about Atlanta being a tech city, what are some of the things you say, your go-to points that you like to raise or bring up?
Well, a lot of Fortune 500 companies are headquartered here.
True.
So they're obviously looking for driving innovation. Again, going back to looking at technology that's going to drive their competitive advantage, maybe scale their business to the next level. So that's where a lot of this is coming from. And it's Atlanta's always been kind of headquartered of the Southeast,
For
right?
sure.
I've always looked at San Francisco, Silicon Valley,
Yep.
and then New York City is obviously another tech mecca. Austin, Texas is another one, but I think Atlanta is definitely up there as well.
Yeah, we go like Silicon Peach. We get all these little things attached to us over the years.
Right.
We just keep growing. It's amazing.
You see more companies opening up software and innovation hubs that are dedicated teams to building great software because again, look at the last 10 years of innovation. It's differentiating applications that have driven competitive advantage, that have engaged consumers to buy more products or services from these companies. So they're obviously putting money behind that.
Yeah, future looks bright.
It does.
It's a good place to be.
Yeah.
All right, so you're here in Atlanta. I always like to close out just asking a little bit about you. So, all right, favorite restaurants. Where do you like to go out?
Well, I used to live in Midtown, so
Nice.
I want to call it Echo. I think it's a great restaurant.
It's a great one.
It's a restaurant where I took my wife when we got engaged. So it was a special dinner for us, an exciting time. So
sounds nice.
I'll throw that one out there.
That's a perfect one.
Yeah.
They've got some with the honey dipped goat
Yes.
cheese fritters.
We had those and they
oh,
were great.
They're so good. They
are
always
good.
do a good job.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, Atlanta's a fun city to be in.
It's a great city.
Well, listen, it's been really nice to have you here today.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us and spending time, and it's a pleasure to be a partner. So thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Nice to talk
Great
to you.
talking to you.
Thanks.